Ho 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 and Merry Christmas and welcome one and all to the traditional Black Archive look through for historical Christmas episodes. Right now we're going to be covering the Voyage of the Damned. If you are looking for the church on Ruby Road, I'm afraid you're a little bit too soon. I think we decided, let's be honest, it's Christmas. We're a bit busy to be doing this. So we're going to be doing this instead. And come New Year, our look back at that wonderful episode will be out. But as time of filming, we can quickly talk about one element of it, of the Christmas episode.
Oh, you want to just get on? Hello, everyone.
So sat opposite me is James. James, bear in mind we haven't watched the episode yet, so this could be completely wrong. What do you think about that music?
So, to put you into where we are, everyone, it is December the 11th as we record this, and about an hour ago, Doctor Who put out the Goblin song on its social media, and it's been put out on streaming platforms as well. It's it's a weird one. It's a new style for Doctor Who. We have musical numbers now about eating babies.
What I will say is that it proves that Rusty Davies is an amazing story writer.
And not a great songwriter.
But who knows? We are doing this in the past.
Maybe it'll work in context.
Yeah, so we might be a little bit timey-wimey on this. But
we're going to be talking about it in New Year, let's be brutally honest.
Let's focus instead now on this episode. As Doctor Who Christmas episodes go, I thought this was a bit odd, but it was all right.
It feels very out of sequence with the rest of Who at that time. For context, Voyage of the Damned is the 2007 Christmas special. So we've got David Tennant as 10, not as 14, as we've just had him. And also, Kylie Minogue is in this episode, in a proper bit of stunt casting.
So we literally, on the episode from The Giggle, we were talking about stunt casting and the impact Disney Plus will have on it. I think this is potentially, at least in modern Who, the first bit of truly stunt casting.
I think
you could argue Catherine Tate was.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Was Catherine Tate was very big at her own right at that time.
Do you think Kylie Minogue can stand on her own 2 feet in this story?
Oh God, yes. I mean, just from the Kylie perspective, as someone who is a great lover of pop music, Kylie Minogue pop music is very, very good and is the textbook for all pop. In terms of the story, I think she actually holds herself up really well. She gets given a good character, which I think is the most important thing, and she's written well, and she comes across very nicely. Mm-hmm. And I think hers is actually the emotional core of the story, which is important to say because I think a lot of this episode is very much big shooty things and violence, so it's nice to have that core there. I mean, if you've seen Voyage of the Damned, you know that it's basically one massive set of set pieces, and there's a lot of stuff blowing up and nearly Buckingham Palace by the end. It's absolutely over the top, but Kylie and her character is actually written quite well and performed quite well, and that's where the emotional core of the story is, and that's why it doesn't just feel like explosions and explosions and explosions. It feels like a story.
Maybe since we were just talking about Christmas musical numbers, this would have been a perfect opportunity to have a completely meaningless musical number.
What now?
No, with Kylie Minogue.
Oh, so the way you looked at me, I thought we were about to launch into one here and now. We had one prepared.
No, we're literally talking about Kylie Minogue.
It would have made sense, wouldn't it? I mean, if that would have been the Christmas special to put the musical number for. But no, largely they play it really seriously, and in some ways, the fact Kylie's in this episode is not really referenced at all. I mean, almost in the first shot, Kylie shows up, but it's almost as if she's an extra.
I got very strong feelings of that shot there, of how he introduced Mel in The Giggle. It was very much just a offhanded, there she is. Now we're moving on with our lives.
Yeah, there was no emphasis placed on it. I think that was a nice way of showing, yeah, okay, you know who she is for the other things she does, but we're going to treat her like any actor here, and we're going to take it seriously.
And of course, for other actors, this story, I think, is most famous, almost sadly, I think, to some extent, but due to the behind-the-scenes shenanigans, particularly of the person who played Copper, Mr. Copper, Clive Rowe. Have you heard any of the stories?
The only bits I've heard about this are the bits that you've teased to me, which I think are now all going to come out. I've been given shades of what this is, but I don't know.
So this was an interview which he gave to Doctor Who magazine around when this episode got aired. So I'm just going to give you a few quotes from it. I think the first one just sets the tone of how this interview is due to go. Hello, Clive. I'm recording this interview on tape. Is that okay? Don't you know shorthand?
Really? Sure. Recording on tape's a problem. That's a confrontative start. That's a very the giggle style, I know I'm right start.
It's a dying art, isn't it? I find dictaphones are more reliable in interview situations. I want to quote you what you say accurately. A lot of actors won't do interviews on tape.
Which ones?
I've never noticed that in almost a decade of doing this job.
No way, is this the start of the interview?
I'm an actor. As soon as you switched on that thing, I'm performing. I think you'll find that proper journalists know shorthand.
What?
I think you'll find I'm not a proper journalist in that case. Don't be silly, I'm quite aggrieved. Why should I do this? I'm not getting paid, am I?
What?
Well, get on with it.
Was this all published?
Yeah.
All of this?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What's going on? Why is he so mad?
There you go. The entire thing.
Who on earth? Who on earth is Clive? I'm gonna have to read some of the rest of this if I can. Could you tell me a bit about your character in Voyage of the Damned? You don't need me to tell you that. Have you read the script? That's what I perform. You can tell them about my character. What a silly question.
So he on set was supposedly the most awkward person to work with, and I feel like
I'm not surprised.
I don't have any anecdotes to hand, but I think the tone of that interview perfectly says why.
There are some great bits in this. Mr. Copper's shaky grasp of Earth culture should get some laughs, the interviewer asks. And Clive says, well, I've become a bit of an old fuddy-duddy, as it wasn't until we'd been filming for 2 weeks that I realised that Mr. Copper is an alien. It's clever. It's clever how they've got in all the trappings of the 1920s or whenever the Titanic was. It was in 1912. Fine. Even earlier, I thought. So he didn't know when the Titanic had crashed.
To be fair, I don't know off the top of my head either.
No, but surely that's like a fairly, as history goes, that's fairly known. The Titanic was in 1912. Maybe that's just me. He ended the interview with Benjamin Cook. This is actually, I didn't even notice this was Benjamin Cook. Right, one final question. I think that's more than enough, isn't it? How many pages are you going to have on Mr. Copper? Well, I was just going to ask. There's no reason why I should talk to you at all, so you shouldn't push it. I'm sure you'll write something very nice. Stony silence in brackets. I know that you all think that this is a big world, this Who business, but it isn't. There are much bigger things than this. Maybe, but it means a lot to a great many of us. Yeah, goodbye. What the hell is that? Why? Who woke him up? What kind of mood was he in?
Apparently that's just how he is in general.
That's just how he is.
According to articles I've seen on it, yes.
And yet he comes across like such a nice old man in the show.
And this is why because I think the plan was to bring him back in the big finale with Donna. You know how they go?
What, in Journey's End?
Yeah, because you know how they goes, oh yeah, we built this with the Mr. Copper Foundation.
Yes, that's a point. Who is it that says that?
It's Prime Minister.
It's the Prime Minister that says that.
Yeah, our favourite Prime Minister.
Yes,
Prime
Harriet.
Minister.
Yeah, former Prime Minister. Yes, we know who you are. It's a shame we don't get Harriet in this Christmas special. Throw me back to 2 years ago.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, despite all of the clear behind-the-scenes tension, I think they turned out a largely decent episode. I just think it has a lot of weird things going on that don't feel in step with the rest of Who at that time. It feels really odd in that respect.
What things are you on about in particular?
I don't know. I just think it's the depiction of 10 for me is a bit different.
I have to say, it feels like, purely rewatching this episode, because I said to you beforehand, this is a Christmas episode I remember nothing about.
Same for me, really.
I remember watching it, but that's about as far as my memory goes with it. It basically just feels like it's the excuse to get all the stock footage of Tennant, whether it be the explosions behind him while he's in a tux, whether it be him just giving his CV out to
the infamous line
to everyone where he goes, "I'm Time Lord, I'm from Gallifrey, I'm blah 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 blah." It just feels like a lot of it is just there to get that stock image.
It feels like if you've ever watched a Michael Bay movie like Transformers or something, where all of the shots are meant to be really massive and everything's blowing up and it's all just like the most heightened scale. Every shot of Tennant is almost like the hero shot. There's the shot of him doing that speech, which he said, and that's all framed really heroically. He walks away from a lot of explosions.
Yeah. Cool guys don't look at explosions. Good old Lonely Island.
Yes, they turn around and they walk away. And he also has that shot which, as it's a Christmas special, uses Jesus imagery to so these angels are like hoisting him above in like a flight position, and it looks a bit ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's like Doctor Who turned into Dwayne Johnson. It's really bizarre.
Do you think these bizarre images affect the episode? Do you think it's a bad story?
I don't think it's a bad story at all. I think actually, and you were saying this while we were watching it, that the story itself is actually quite solid. It's fairly simple. It's fairly focused.
It based on my dodgy memory, bearing in mind which even the Christmas episodes we've watched for Black Archive, it's an annual thing. So we started this. This is our third year of doing it. Based on my memory, this feels like an alright Christmas story, because traditionally, Doctor Who Christmas stories are just the fluffiest of fluff.
Yeah, they're always meant to be a little bit more fluffy.
But this one here feels like it's actually got a bit of edge. Particularly, we've got a scene where they're walking across a bridge, and basically half our motley crew die.
Oh yeah, they rip off half the cast.
And it feels very different to that fluff which we were so used to seeing.
Well, it's kind of, and this sort of goes back to the Dwayne Johnson point. Voyage of the Damned is really a disaster movie.
Yeah.
That's what it's trying to be. You've got the sort of gang of survivors and the leader and everything, and they come under new threats as they're trying to survive, and every so often some of them are picked off by said threats, and the gang reduces in size. Or it's like a horror movie where like there's always that final girl at the end. Mm-hmm. So it uses those conventions, which is not what we usually get on Who. There are some episodes that follow that. I think from the series before that, 42 is sort of like that, which was actually a Chris Chibnall one, which I don't mind. There are some Chibnall things that are good. Just overall,
shock horror.
Overall, it's maybe not as good. So I guess that stands it out as being a bit odd, because that's different, and all the characters are new. More importantly, with the exception of 10. Yeah, it just, because obviously the episode before this was Last of the Time Lords, which is all Martha, and the Doctor was a baby for a bit.
And an old man for a bit.
And then the next episode is Partners in Crime, and that's Donna, and that's Series 4, which obviously has its own feel. So it feels like an odd midpoint between those two parts.
Yeah. Shall we start looking at the actual story then itself then? Because we've done a lot of dancing around it. I think
I think we have, haven't we?
I think if you listen to us a lot, you'll notice if there's a very simplistic story, we do quite a lot of padding in the start.
Yes. So, I mean, getting to the story, it's a pretty simple setup. If you remember the end of the third season of New Who, you'll remember it ended with the Doctor flying away. Martha's told him that she wants to stay home, doesn't want to keep travelling anymore. And then the TARDIS crashes into the Titanic. What follows? And then, so what we do is we end up beaming onto the Titanic, and we find that it is the Titanic. Ostensibly, they've dressed it up like the old Titanic. It's very period drama. Looks lovely. Until you realise it's in space.
Now, going on from that initial scene, I'm not sure how much of a big fan of it I am.
Do you think it's a bit cheap?
It feels cheap, particularly because the Doctor essentially just presses rewind.
Oh, yeah, in terms of the Titanic actually crashing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does fully rewind it, which is, yeah, cop-outy.
You do just kind of feel like, what was the point of that other than making everyone go at the end of the last episode? Wait, what?
Yeah, I mean, we criticised, do you remember the Time of Angels cliffhanger in Flux, where we were like, oh, Jodie's an angel, how on earth are they going to get out of that? That's an amazing cliffhanger. And then they resolve it in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just like that. It makes you feel slightly cheated.
At least with the Flux one, the Village of Angels one, it did lead on to a story. It was a very bad story.
But yeah, it led somewhere.
It led somewhere. This one here, he literally just presses rewind.
Yeah, and that's it. That's your job done.
It feels like he could have naturally landed on the Titanic rather than doing this whole crash scene.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, it's kind of designed to make that happen. And then there was also, I forget this, do you remember Time Crash?
Yeah,
Because that happened in the middle of this, didn't it?
Yes.
That was set at this point in the canon.
Yes.
And Peter Davison shows up.
It's a weird start, isn't it?
It is a bit of an odd start.
But once we get past that weirdness, I feel like the start works.
Yeah, it's a setup, isn't it?
We very quickly get set up in a very stable and good way.
I think so, yeah. We set the stakes of the story, don't we?
Yeah.
We're on the Titanic, we're in space, and obviously if you think of the name Titanic, what's probably going to happen to the ship, which we get onto quite quickly.
Some meteorites get chucked at it.
But most importantly, it's not just, oh, we crashed into some meteorites, how terrible. This is a deliberate crash.
So it's initially sort of set up, which it's the captain's doing. He's kind of realised, which he's only got 6 months to live.
6 months to live.
6 months to live.
Yeah.
So he's just going to do this anyway as some sort of act of revenge. It's kind of left open.
Well, they say that the people who asked him to do it, which already sets up that there's something more at work, gave him a lot of money for his family, and so this was almost his parting gift to them because, well, he was going to die anyway.
Yeah. But then as the story goes on, the captain dies. We find out that there is a real bad guy in a buggy-like thing.
Bad guy in a buggy. You don't make him sound very threatening, do you?
I mean, so the thing is about Max, though, is that he's made out to be basically this really rich, like basically the richest man, I think, on this planet, pretty much. But we later find out, which he is like, I forgot how old he is, like
176.
Wasn't he that he's been running for company for 176 years?
So 176 plus another unknown amount of years.
Let's say somewhere under 200.
Probably over 200.
Around 200.
Yeah.
But he's got like this really cheap, like put together, basically a buggy.
Hmm.
But then on the other side, we've got. Right, let's take bets. How much am I going to butcher this name?
I'm willing to bet quite a bit, unless you're reading it. In which case, I'm still willing to bet quite a bit.
We've got other side books in the story, such as Banakafalata.
Almost.
But he's like this really sophisticated, shiny cyborg. I feel like they've only made Max look like that just to be evil.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's probably a question of budget in there because this is one of the more expensive Who episodes, I think, from that period. I mean, it's Christmas. They do get a bit of budget for that. I think Max Capricorn, more than anything, I don't even kind of regard the equipment that he's in, that whole buggy thing. It's more the fact that he reminds me of an East End market trader who just so happens to own a massive ship company. Like, he comes across as sleazy. Used to. Even in, the videos they play on the screens where he's like, and I should know, my name is Max. And he just has that really sleazy vibe to him, and it always sets you off.
It's someone who you wouldn't trust to be on a spaceship for.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why would you trust him? Like, big business leaders, with the exception of the Silicon Valley stuff, tends to be very charismatic. Well, even a lot of the Silicon Valley people, can be very charismatic, hold a presentation, and seem like someone you want to follow. Max doesn't look that way
No.
at all. He looks like he looks like, and he does, he looks like someone who would just happily just kill a planet for his own gain.
He looks like someone who has been arrested many times for fraud.
He is part of a mafia, by the looks of it.
Yeah, or something like that. Or he's somehow found a way to make a legitimate business, this Starliner business that he has. But by this point in the story, it has failed, from what we hear, so perhaps not a great business.
I don't think the business has failed. Like, they have the entire thing. They go, oh, it has failed. But then we later find out the only reason why Max thinks it's failed is because he's been kicked off.
Yeah, I think that was probably down to economically there were such poor results for the business that his board decided to boot him, and obviously Max didn't want to be booted because power and so on.
He's a little bit power hungry.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think he's a strong villain? I think that he comes across as one of the more lesser thought through villains we had, especially in Davies Who.
I feel like he could have been, but he just wasn't present. We spent this entire time with misdirection going, oh no, it's the captain. Oh no, it's the angel.
Yeah, the hosts themselves.
Hosts. We never really... He's basically there and gone within 5 minutes.
He has a little bit of a, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids reveal.
Yeah.
Where he shows up in the last 5 minutes.
Like, it feels like it would have been better, even if we just got shots of his buggy, like a wheel or something, like leaning into something with him being behind the scenes.
Yeah. Or maybe he calls the captain at one point and you hear like a voice being like,
are you ready?
Yeah, are you ready? Like something like that. Or maybe his voice would be like digitally altered by the buggy. Something like that.
Yeah.
Would lift it. But
I was saying, this is like the least memorable episode for me. And even after just watching it, he feels like the least memorable film we've got.
Yes. I think that probably comes down to the fact that the story isn't really a work out the person behind it story. That's more of an afterthought. The first thing is surviving.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's probably good to talk about that ship crashing. Although I do realise there is one thing that happens before the ship crashes that is important, not just for this episode, but for a lot of episodes following on. And it's when they beam down to Earth for a little bit.
Yes, we meet our friend who likes, as we've just recently found out, likes to shoot a few moles.
I saw a lot of criticism on Twitter that they were like, he wouldn't do that in the last years of his life.
It feels like they could have given him anything and it would have been more realistic. I feel like even if they have just said he's gone fishing.
Oh yeah, it could have been anything. Like the point of that was to just for Wilfred to be alive forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, in case you hadn't worked it out, we meet Wilfred Mott. Bernard Cribbins shows up in this episode. He's manning a newsstand.
Now this is, I think, where a trick of the memory comes in for me, because I remembered there being more of a gap between his introduction in this salesman thing and then us finding out he's Donna's granddad.
Yeah.
For some reason in my head, I had it remembered which he was kind of his own character before that, and they just kind of went, oh, Wilfred's popular, Donna's popular, let's just bring them together. But no, this, like, even judging by the on the next time scenes.
Yeah, he's there in that preview. Do you know what actually happened with Cribbins?
No.
So the initial plan for season 4 was that character was going to be Donna's dad. So that was going to be Jeffrey Noble, who was in The Runaway Bride briefly. The problem, unfortunately, was that the actor, Howard Atwood, had gone to the read-throughs, but much like what happened to Bernard Cribbins for the specials, he passed away before filming could take place.
So was Bernard Cribbins kind of an accidental add-on?
Totally, yeah. It was a total accident, Wilfred.
Oh, there you go.
Because Bernard Cribbins was originally intended to appear in Voyage of the Damned as really just a cameo.
Yeah.
And it was just going to be a bit fun. He would do a scene. That's great. He's a legend, obviously. Was before. But when suddenly they couldn't use Jeffrey Noble as a character anymore, that's when they called Bernard and said, how would you like to be Donna's granddad as a last-minute change? And that's how we met Wilfred. I mean, obviously it's terrible that someone had to die, but it ended up working out well.
Yeah.
But from an unfortunate situation, we had a fortunate outcome with a really good character.
Let's talk about the hosts. here because they're a bit of a weird creature, aren't they?
Yeah, so the hosts are in keeping with the Christmas theme of the episode. They're dressed up as angels.
Are they always dressed up as angels?
Well, they've got
Just
that
like
golden thing,
it
the white cloth.
Obviously makes sense in the context of this story. But if we think of it as a cruise liner which is travelling to all sorts of different places, just a bit weird.
I just think they can be dressed up for all manner of theming. They just, in this case, they happen to have the angel clothing and, with their weapon, the angel halo that turns into the world's most dangerous ultimate frisbee.
And they can also fly.
Oh yeah, they can fly as well. It's the future. Well, no, it's not. Science.
I kind of feel like the hosts are some of the weakest parts of this story, just because they seem to just randomly gain abilities whenever the plot requires it.
They're not really set up, are they? They just sort of start. It's sort of like the pilot fish.
Yeah.
In a way that we had in the past 2 Christmas specials. That there almost has to be a theme where a Christmas-oriented creature kills.
But at least with the hosts, there's a reason for them to exist within the story. The hosts,
yes, that's true.
The hosts, the pilot fish feel like they're literally just there. So Rusty over can go, look, we have ticked off the Christmas tick box. There's this robot Santa.
Yeah, they really do their best to tick off all the Christmas stuff in this episode. I think they largely do it well. The thing I have about Christmas specials, is that they should be a bit more fun.
Yeah.
And they should lean into the Christmas. Whether that's objectively plausible for the canon of Doctor Who is a secondary thing. But it's a Christmas special. It's a whole family are meant to be gathered around the television celebrating, and it should be a bit of fun.
But this one here, though, is surprisingly dark, especially for Tennant.
It's got edge for Tennant. I think it's got edge in two ways.
Yeah.
The first way is that Voyage of the Damned feels like Independence Day, or like the day after tomorrow, or 2012, like the big Roland Emmerich disasters.
Yeah, it's a very toned down disaster film.
Yeah, terrible thing happens, and the Doctor and a gang of guests who we've met on the ship have to survive. Many of them do not. There is, but there's a lot of like darkness and edge even in that. I mean, there's a character called Rixton Slade in this story.
Yeah,
and he is a really nasty piece of work.
He is your stereotypical posh dude who, annoyingly, is the only one who survives outside of Mr. Copper.
Yeah, and that's almost the annoying part of it, is that a lot of the good characters, so there's that couple who won the competition to be there, they both die. Banner Kafalata gives his life to sort of EMP the angels, and then he dies. Astrid obviously doesn't make it out, although her Stardust does.
The weakest ending.
One of the more vague Doctor Who endings. You half expect Neil Patrick Harris's, well, that's all right then, to come after that one. But yeah, Rixton is a really dark character, makes just the worst lines. And the last thing we see of him is, it's even better that I lived because I transferred my shares against Capricorn and made a ton of money from this as well. It's like, it's really just like a nasty, rich people aren't very nice point.
Now, you almost expect him to go, but don't worry, I've got plans to donate it to the victims or something like that. But
no, it's nothing.
Nothing there.
He's just a really dreadful character. I think it's just Russell going, not all good people survive and not all bad people die. It's just circumstance.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty, dark thing to talk about on, your family Christmas special.
I mean, this one here does also go into story about equality as well, because we've talked about previously how, why do I keep doing this to myself? Banner Kafalaka is a cyborg. We have Matt Capricorn saying about how their planet hates cyborgs. They've got a whole equality line going through this on this original planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that get suggested. There's also that part, again, that couple that won the competition. There's a line where they say, well, we actually had to spend 5,000 credits to get on. And they say, well, that would take us 20 years to earn that. The second way it's dark, beyond the other characters, is actually the way Ten is in this episode.
Yeah.
Now, if you've watched David Tennant's run, or if you know anything about like that part of Doctor Who, you know that the 10th Doctor has a bit of a dark streak to him. I think it's one of the reasons why he's a fan favourite, is because there was this feeling that very, very lightly under the surface there was this darkness to him.
You didn't need to didn't he scratch too hard for it to start coming up?
Exactly, yeah. And in this episode, it really comes out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's that bit at the end that really strikes me when he's trying to get Astrid back with the teleport.
Yeah.
And there's a point where he screams like, no, if I just do this, I can do anything. Yeah. Like there's this real like arrogance that comes out. And that's always been part of the character. It's just interesting that in the Christmas special, they highlighted that a lot.
I think it's something which is always highlighted about the Doctor, like even through other variants of the Doctor, is that when he's without a human companion, he's not that nice. I mean, we even see, like, in the first episode, which no one can watch anymore, The Unearthly Child.
All the way back.
We even see it going back then, when he's not used to travelling with humans. He goes to clubber a injured caveman to death.
Oh yeah, he's not a good piece of work, William Hartnell. It's only over time they softened the Doctor as a character.
But it's only ever when he's with a companion, and in this story, he's not. We see it again in the specials when David Tennant is wandering around by himself in like the waters of Mars and all that kind of stuff. He gets incredibly self-righteous.
Definitely. I think the other thing that's different about Tennant in this episode, actually I think to almost all the other Tennant episodes, is that usually his relationship with companions or people that he meets in the stories is one of, oh, you're competent, you're really brave, we've done this together, I like you, you should probably have a trip, that would be great.
Yeah.
With Astrid,
I think
it's broadly just like...
I think with Astrid, he's just lonely and just wants someone who he can take with him. But then also we get an interesting development, sort of like as this story goes on, where his view kind of changes to some regard. Because with Astrid, he's there going, I'm lonely, I want someone to come join me. But at the end, Mr. Copper goes, can I join you? And he goes, no, I'd rather do this alone.
Yeah, but this is my point, is that I think that's not about the loneliness. That's simply because him and Astrid were attracted to one another. Like that's how it comes across anyway. I know that the Doctor is, you know, it's not very often the Doctor gets involved romantically in that way in the series, but there is a lot of suggestion of that, and it feels like a proper romance story.
I disagree.
Do you really? I think that's all the way it come across.
I think Astrid does, definitely. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Astrid definitely does. But his reaction when Astrid randomly goes up to him and goes, it's a tradition of our planet, goes kissing him. He doesn't seem very happy or comfortable. He feels on the verge of disgusted and going, I need to go on and do my own thing
I
now.
wouldn't say he was on the verge of disgust. I agree with you with maybe he was uncomfortable, but I think... Because you know when they meet at the start of the story, he's very like... He's very cocksure. That's the word I would use. Like, he's very like, oh, look at me. Oh, yeah, I did this. Oh, I snuck on the ship. Oh, yeah, traveling's great. You should come. Like, it's very, like, flirtatious in the way he's written.
I just think that's David, the 10th Doctor, in how he is when he's without anyone.
Yeah, it feels more Casanova than 10th Doctor.
He just wants companionship.
Yeah, maybe. I just think that comes across differently, how it does in all the other Tennant stories. Like, it's more obvious, I think.
Yeah.
That it's built around that. Not a criticism, just an observation, I think.
Yeah. Right, let's go towards the ending.
Yeah, let's. I mean, obviously, we've talked about they need to sort of get out. The hosts are trying to kill them. Eventually, we make our way through Max Capricorn. Well, we get to Capricorn's kind of lair, which is Deck 31, don't we? And that's when we have Astrid's sacrifice, using a forklift to take Capricorn's buggy off into the ship's engines with her following on. Here's a question. Do you think Astrid... Obviously, she wouldn't have been companion because Kylie wasn't going to commit to a full series. But would that have been a good character for a series?
I think so. I think this sets her up very much to be one.
Yeah.
I almost get the feeling like if it wasn't Kylie, it potentially could have been.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think moreover, the point of making Astrid sort of such a perfect companion in that she was brave and that she's nice and that, let's face it, it's David Tennant's Doctor, she was pretty, is actually more to bring out the tragedy when she does die.
Yeah.
And to make the Doctor really feel it, and that's what gets Tennant to that point where he sort of loses his front and he gets all arrogant and sort of dark again. I'm not sure whether it would work as a full series. I quite like that character for one episode.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes the point that not all the good people survive.
I feel like she would have been a good companion because it's something which we haven't seen at all in New Who.
Really?
Is that she's an alien character.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a point.
So her reaction to Earth as it actually is, rather than Mr. Copper's bizarre history of Earth, where if you're listening to this, I hope you're enjoying the day of boxing where everyone goes out on the street and boxes.
Yes. It's funny.
I just feel like that'd be an interesting element for us to have in the companion, which I don't think we're getting anytime soon,
No,
sadly.
I mean, it kind of happened with Nardole, didn't it?
To some extent, yeah, but we kind of never got him.
And there was the Paternoster gang. I know they weren't companions, but
we'd never got any of them. With Nardole, he was kind of already familiar.
yeah.
With Paternoster, they were already familiar. We never really got the, oh, this is weird Earth custom, or a fish out of water kind of energy, which I feel like we could have potentially gotten slightly with Astrid.
Yeah, I could see that working on a series. I think I quite like the way they use that character, and I think her ending, like her dying anyway, was right. That Stardust thing, it's a little bit fluffy.
I feel like everything after her death with her character is a little bit weird and didn't need to be there. But
yeah.
everything up to her death was good.
Yeah. He does kiss her ghost, which is a bit weird. I'm not sure how that scene washes, but yeah. The other thing that happens, of course, is that outside of the ship crashing, because it's in orbit above Earth and the engines are the only thing keeping it in orbit, once those engines fail, there's only one place for the ship to go. And that turns out to be Buckingham Palace. And who, Owen, is up there on the bridge, who we need to talk about for the Doctor to save the ship with?
Midshipman Frame.
Well, I think you're missing a key name of his name.
Am I?
His first name.
Alonso.
Alonso Frame. Played by Russell Tovey, who, if you've read The Writer's Tale, which is the book that Russell T Davies and Benjamin Cook, who we mentioned earlier, who did that interview with Clive.
Lovely interview.
Yeah, they did that book together around this time, and it's an exchange of emails between the two, if you don't know. And one of the emails that Russell sent was around casting Russell Tovey for Voyage of the Damned, pretty much solely on the idea that he found him attractive. And also wanted a character called Alonso so he could make the Alonzi Alonso pun.
Yeah.
The whole thing is sort of like, it's really self-indulgent, but it works. And I really like that character.
Yeah, I like it. For some reason, this does thing of trick of a memory of back when it had been broadcast. I was convinced when the Doctor gets into the bridge, which Alonso Frame was dead.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but in my head I had that trick of a memory.
No, because I'd always remembered the Alonzi Alonso line.
I didn't.
So I knew that Russell Tovey was there. I think that character just comes across really well. That's another one that would have worked as a companion, actually.
Yeah.
And obviously there is that one cameo he gets to make when Tennant's doing the rounds when he's dying at the end of time, and him and slightly problematic now Captain Jack meet up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that was a good character, and it's nice to see his origin and where he comes from. And then there's the cheesy bit where they obviously save Buckingham Palace and the Queen shows up.
Hello, bit in storage. Didn't need to be there. How are you?
Yeah, it's a bit of fun. It's Christmas. You can let it slide, I guess. But objectively, it's sort of an odd section.
Yeah. It just gives for Rusty Davis an excuse to use news people, which he likes to do anyway.
He does like to use the news people, doesn't he? We get a lot of that, like every big episode, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's a big trope of Russell is news.
Yeah. We even had it in for specials with For Giggle.
Yeah, we saw Trinity Wells again. We don't see Trinity Wells in this episode, unfortunately.
No, it's largely a UK-based story, so I don't know why we would get the US.
Yeah, because they always brought Trinity in when it was like a worldwide invasion. Like she gets a lot of screen time in The Stolen Earth, I remember.
Yeah.
And that, listeners, is pretty much the story. Once they've saved the ship, they get back into orbit. They can't quite save Astrid, but at the very least, the Doctor can go and find his TARDIS, which at some point during this madness crashed in London, conveniently.
Yeah, and they also... Mr. Copper is facing forgery charges because it turns out, which he completely made up his degree, which, as we've discussed, leads to quite amusing statements about Christmas.
Like the space shuffles as well.
Yes, yeah. So he goes off to be a millionaire off, and he starts a foundation, which later becomes an integral part of the story, as we've previously mentioned.
Yeah, it comes up in The Stolen Earth, actually, given that we just mentioned it. A nice little reference to keep it relevant. That's one of the things that Russell's really good at, is just linking between stories, even if they are in small ways.
Yeah.
I think what was always good about that period was everything felt part of a larger world, and I hope with the Whoniverse now that we're going to get that, especially with the spin-offs that they seem to be planning.
And that seems like a good old place to end this podcast.
Yeah.
So
go and enjoy Christmas.
Yeah, let's go have some turkey.
Well, turkey's really dry meat.
Nah, turkey and ham.
Okay, yeah, turkey and ham is good.
Two things together. So, James, how would you score this episode out of 10?
I think it's a weird one. I do like it, but it doesn't. I do like it, but I think when you compare it to the previous two specials, there's something missing for me. I don't know whether that's just that I think the story works more effectively and it's more emotionally engaging to me. I think the one thing that Voyage of the Damned lacks, besides Astrid, is a real need to care for the characters. I think they're well set up.
We don't have like in the first special, which we covered, we had Rose.
Yep.
In the second, we have Donna, who, despite at that point in time only being there for one episode, felt very beefed up.
It's because we really focus on her in that episode.
Whereas Astrid doesn't feel like an afterthought, but she definitely isn't as beefed up in terms of
That's the bit that works the best.
Yeah.
But I think the episode spends too long focusing on just big action set pieces and kind of loses the emotion of the story at times. And as well, a lot of those bits with Tennant walking away from explosions and doing big speeches and having Jesus imagery thrown on him is a really odd depiction, and to me it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to give this a 6.
I'm honestly probably going to say the same, largely just for the memorability factor. I didn't remember anything from this. As we've realised, half of what I did remember from this episode turned out to be complete bollocks anyway.
Can you say Banner Caffalata?
No.
And at that point, then that shows you the episode's maybe not the most memorable.
Yes. So join us next week where we'll be discussing today's big episode, for one which we have, depending when this comes out, you're either going to be watching in a few hours' time or you would have already watched. Yeah,
that is The Church on Ruby Road, the first proper Ncuti Gatwa 15th Doctor Who story. And we'll be talking about that on New Year's Day.
So subscribe to get that directly wherever you listen to your podcast, and you can also find us on all sorts of different social media platforms.
That's true. You can get in touch with us on Instagram at Black Archive Pod is our account. You can send us it's not a tweet anymore, is it? Is it still a tweet, even though it's not called Twitter? It's a post now. But if you're on there, you can get in touch with us. We are at Black Archive Pod there as well. And you can email us via blackarchivepod@gmail.com.
So thank you very much for listening. Catch you next week.
And catch you next year for the next Doctor if we get there. David Morrissey, Victorian Britain. Going to be fun.